Okay, so today we are going to introduce bioenergetics, which is one of the particular cell processes that the cell uses to make energy. And the two processes we're going to talk about are photosynthesis and cell respiration. But before we get started, just kind of take a look at the word bioenergetics. And if you take it apart, bio means life. You see the word energy in here with energetics. So it's really how life creates energy. And thinking back to your earth and environmental course that you had probably before biology, all forms of energy for life start with the sun. So sunlight energy, light actually travels in waves. We'll talk about that in a little bit. And that's where this diagram is going to start. The light energy is captured by chloroplasts, which perform photosynthesis and convert that light energy into glucose, which is a form of chemical energy. There's energy stored in those bonds of that chemical structure of glucose. That glucose then gets converted by the mitochondria in eukaryotes in a process called cellular respiration. It converts glucose into another type of chemical energy called ATP. And you can see some energies given off as heat. That's because energy is not created nor destroyed. It gets transformed into a different type. So most of that's going to be here in ATP. And then from one of the products, carbon dioxide, that gets cycled back in, and this process continues. If we just think about what are the jobs of the cells, producing energy is one of the cell's main jobs. It needs energy for all of its activities, to clean up waste, to move materials. So that's one of its main jobs. Another job is to produce proteins. We'll talk about that in Unit 5. And then also another big job is to reproduce, to grow, and to also replace damaged or diseased cells. So it's important to note that no matter what type of cell, prokaryote or eukaryote, they all have these same jobs. And as we're talking about whose job is what, it's important to understand some terminology. One is nutrition, and that's how you obtain energy. And the other is metabolism. It's how you use energy. So sometimes these words can get confusing. So I have them up here for you in your notes so that you can refer back to it. Again, nutrition is how you obtain. Metabolism is how you use it. So an autotroph is going to obtain its energy from the sun and convert it into its own food that it makes. There's also extra energy available for others that may eat that autotroph. So auto prefix means self, and troph means energy. Some examples of organisms that are autotrophs are plants, algae, and even some bacteria. Now, we tend to focus just our energy on photosynthesis of converting light energy to chemical energy, but some organisms that don't have light have developed a process called chemosynthesis, and they convert chemical energy into another form of chemical energy. It's important to note that autotrophs are also sometimes known as producers. And if you think back to earth science, again, those producers are usually found at the beginning of every food chain or the base of every energy pyramid. A heterotroph, hetero means opposite, and again, troph means energy. So these examples are humans and fungi. These are organisms that can't make their own food, so they obtain energy from whatever they consume. So just like autotrophs are known as producers, heterotrophs are also sometimes known as consumers. And when we get to ecology, you may have heard of terms like primary consumer, secondary consumer, tertiary consumer, and that refers into like how far removed they are from the producer that originally started that food chain. So what is ATP and what's its role? It's very important that you have checked out the textbook and found that ATP is the energy that the cell can use. It's the molecule that the cell can use to actually do all of its work. So whether it's going to use it to move, reproduce, replicate DNA, or active transport, ATP does the job. Glucose is just too large of a molecule. So take a look at this analogy down below and figure out which molecule is like the tank of the delivery truck and which is like the gas tank of the car. And make sure you check in with me. To explain how ATP works, we can kind of think of it like a fully charged cell phone. Right after you take it off the charger, it's at 100%, all this energy available, and then it does work. And when it does work, it loses one of its phosphates. So this T stands for triphosphate. There's 3 phosphates. When it loses that phosphate, it becomes ADP, and it's like a partially charged battery. When energy is obtained from food, that battery can get recharged by adding another phosphate. And now instead of just the 2 phosphates down here, it's back to 3 phosphates. And so this process just continues and it's recycled. You may hear the terms what cellular work, ATP is used for cellular work. That's just the jobs of the cells. And again, recapping, the cell does active transport, the cell is responsible for making proteins, movement, cell division, and all of those things take energy, and ATP is the form of energy that can be used.